This episode of SESSLERS Something is brought to you by Dead Island Riptide. Hey everybody, I'm back once again without beard. I was still shooting out in Texas, one of the longest, more challenging shoots I've ever had to do. I once again cannot wait to tell you more about it. Time will allow me to do so. But you know, last week went so well with just answering a couple of questions. I thought we'd do it again this week because the game industry just hasn't done enough this week that I feel like screaming, ranting, or raving about it. So I'm going to answer more questions. I know a lot of you wanted me to answer questions about the state of game journalism. No, because I'd rather talk about my bunions and go down that path one more time. So we're going to talk about something different, and the first one comes from Jason Drysdale. Hey Sess, I love your thoughts on how consumers, developers, and publishers assign value to games. The widespread adoption of achievements has increased the time we commit to completionist activities, like collecting flags in Assassin's Creed. These peripheral dynamics rarely contribute anything substantive to game narrative other than more time. Length seems to be how often we assign value rather than intentional design, a strong point of view, and of course fun. What's your take? Thanks much. Jason, thank you for this question. This is something that has been plaguing me for quite some time, and I'm glad that you pointed out Assassin's Creed. I'm going to actually expand that a little bit. It's something you see in a lot of Ubisoft games because it was very present for me in Far Cry 3, and probably more so, it was more obvious than I would say even in the Assassin's Creed games. But this is something that is pervasive. Even in a game like Halo, there's a heavy collection quality just to figure out more of the backstory. And I am of the mind that at times it really can detract from narrative. Once you have a collection thing, especially, I'm just going out on a limb here, when you have a young male audience that has already been fashioned on a world of baseball cards and then Pokemon in the sense of just having a completist just sensibility, wanting to have all versions of all things, it can distract from the gameplay because it doesn't really teach you when you're playing the game which to favor, keeping in with the main narrative so you get the feeling of the story and how it goes, and when to break away and do all of the side missions and to come back in. It is an economic thing in many ways. It keeps the player engaged with the game. It does definitely make the game feel like it's longer, and as you pointed out quite succinctly, it gives the sense that you're getting more value. But yes, I think many times it happens at the expense of the experience of the game. It can, as I said, weaken the narrative. It can also just make you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. And it really has to be how it complements the gameplay, but more importantly, if that gameplay is fundamentally satisfying. And in the case of Far Cry 3, I would have to say yes. Then a lot of the side missions are you just getting to indulge that gameplay again and getting you to experience it more, get better at it, and you know, come out of it with kind of your own story of how you handle the various situation. Something that I was not as much of a fan of in Far Cry 3 was the hunting of the animals with the specific weapon with these specific challenges. It wasn't arbitrary, but it was almost challenge for challenge's sake. It didn't play off of do it how you like to, as most of the rest of the game did. And I think it was that dissonance that made it so frustrating. Having said that, the reward were very special weapons that at least give you the promise of having something to make the rest of the game feel easier, or something that opens up those opportunities in the game. There's an ebb and flow, and I've always enjoyed it to a point, but I find that every time I tell myself I'm going to be a completist, I'm going to go for every achievement, I'm going to go for every collectible book or person that you can find in the game, I usually give that up about 70% of the way through. That's usually when the narrative takes over. That's when my exhaustion also seems to take over and you just want the resolution. Okay, I'm going to get to the second question in a moment, but we need to thank our sponsor. This week it is Dead Island Riptide. Here's a game where you can return to the island of Palanai that has now been flooded, and you can bonk various zombies in various ways. It is out tomorrow, April the 23rd. It'll be available on the PlayStation 3, the 360, and of course the PC. For more information, go to deadisland.com. And our second question is from Ornery Buddha. I like that name. I'm trying to, that's up there with Sexy Unicorn in terms of trying to have a hard time envisioning how that's supposed to work. Hey Adam, do you think Microsoft is hurting themselves or, quote, shooting themselves in the foot by giving Sony all this time to build buzz unchallenged? Thank you, Ornery Buddha. I do find it a little bit curious that Microsoft is definitely circling the wagons, and it's very unclear, at least at this taping,